Hi members, welcome back. Today is Sophia Day, Sophia Ring. So before we start, there's some things I want to talk about so that you can move forward in a successful way. First of all, when I make prongs, I want to introduce you to the flathead plier. We use this a lot to kind of, help us tap things down and grip things. But there is a purpose that I use this wide plier for, and that's prong making. I measure the length of the prong by using actually the head of the plier. This one is 3 millimeter. This is, probably a $7 tool. You can find it online anywhere and certainly in my Amazon store as well. Other flathead pliers can be a little bit smaller. Like this one is a 2 millimeter flathead plier, and it's really good for making shorter prongs. I use the 3 millimeter plier to make prongs for stones that are 7, 8, 10 millimeter in diameter. It's really good for having coverage. You can see that, I need the prong to sit about 3/4 of the way, into the cup, and then just about a millimeter or two over the cup so that we can have the little bend. So by the time you bend the wire around the 3 millimeter prong, because of the way wire bends and the body of the wire, the prong is actually more like 4 or 4.5 or so millimeter by the time you get the head of it and the bottom of it. Okay, so this is an ideal plier for using 8 millimeter, 9 millimeter, 10 millimeter stones, 12 millimeter stones that are about 5 or 6 millimeter deep. If my facet here, if my gemstone were much deeper in the pavilion, then this setting would not be appropriate for it. Okay, so while we can have a point, we can have a cabochon as well. You really don't want to get any deeper than about 5 millimeters for this particular plier and this particular style of setting. If I were going to set prongs for something smaller like 6 millimeter, it would be to my advantage to use the smaller plier, because the larger plier would give me too much length and it would just overshadow my gemstone. So I would choose the smaller 2 millimeter. Let me see if I can hold this up here for you. I would choose the smaller 2 millimeter plier for 6 millimeter or so gemstones for my prong lengths. I hope that makes sense. There's going to be some practice. There's no real way to measure or gauge for this and make it enjoyable and make it so that everybody can just pick it up and do it. So there's a little wiggle room in this, and I did spend the day also redesigning it slightly to make it a little easier for you when you set the cup. So here is a 7 millimeter stone. I used the larger 3 millimeter flat plier, and you can see that my prongs are just perfectly set right to the ridge of the gemstone. And by the ridge I mean, the little ridge that goes around. The flat part is the table, and then there's a little ridge. Your prongs need to grab that little ridge all the way around as consistently as you can. The original setting, the original design, did not use a 26 gauge tie wire here. I feel like this will be easier for you. It's optional. In Sophia Ring, I don't use this tie wire. It's more like this. I feed the bigger 20 gauge right back through the center of the cup and I come out. And that's what holds this whole cup together. This works, but what happens is when you bend these prongs, the valleys of them because they're not tied in, sometimes pop forward, and that makes an inconsistent prong. So you can do it this way, and you just have to watch that the valleys between the prongs stay, inside and towards the center circle here. If you use a 28 gauge wire and you tie those valleys down by simply coiling around there prior to bending the prongs, it will be much easier for you to get consistent prongs all the way around the gemstone. For 8mm, 10mm, 12mm gemstones, I like to use between 6 or 8 prongs, depending on the look that you want. And even for ovals, it works. Same way. I made the prongs the exact same way. I just, put them around an oval stone and gave a little more space to the sides rather than tried to get them completely uniform all the way around because of the nature of the oval. The other tool I want to introduce you to is the bent nose plier. For some of you new to my channel and my membership, this is a 45-degree fine bent nose plier. Some of these bent nose pliers are 90 degree, so there's a sharper angle here, and they tend to be wider in the tooth. And that's good too, but when you're working in real tight spaces like these prongs and in between these prongs to bend them up, this is really a good tool to invest in. A finer, very thin, 45-degree bent nose plier. And the very last tool we need for this project is the ring mandrel. This is a one-wire ring technique. I believe it's unique to anything else out there that you're going to see in ring designs. Usually we start with multiple bands of wire and we bring them together and set the gemstone. In the case of Sophia Ring, I use one single wire to make the entire ring, except for maybe if you use the 28 gauge to tie the cup up. And the ring mandrel, we'll use the smaller portion of it for the first half of the ring, and then you'll use the appropriate size that you want for the actual shank of the ring. I've changed my desk setup today a little bit because with my tennis elbow and my broken ribs being on the same side of my body, it was difficult for me to work with my arms stretched out. So I rearranged everything, including my lights, and I don't have my measured mat here because I'm not on that surface. I'm somewhere where the camera can be right next to me. So that's why we look a little different today. The wire that I'm using is actually 21 gauge round dead soft copper wire today. 21 gauge is not as small as 22 gauge and not as large as our go-to 20 gauge wire. This is a really good in-between diameter for handling gemstones of these various sizes. It's substantial, so you can, capture the larger gemstone, but it's not so thick as 20 gauge. It's very slight, but the 20 gauge would be a little more difficult on you to make these prongs. 22 gauge would work really great as well, and 22 gauge works really good for the tinier gemstones because there's not so much wire girth kind of overwhelming the gemstone. But 21 gauge I find is, for me, the perfect gauge for Sophia Ring. You can use whatever you have on hand. The wire length that I'm starting off with here is 26 inches. 26 inches will handle 8 prongs and will give you a size 6. If you need a larger size ring, I advise that you go with 28 or even 30 inches of wire. And that might be difficult on some people to work with, in which case, there's lots of ring designs that use multiple bands in shorter lengths. This is a 9mm diameter gemstone. an odd size. Usually they're 8, usually they're 10, but this one is 9 millimeter. And it's about 5 millimeter in depth between the point and the table. To make the accordion prongs, I have a 26-inch length of 21 gauge round soft copper wire. I'm finding the middle of my wire and I'm just going to put my flathead pliers on it. I'm going to push my finger against the wire and just bend it over and close to the plier, kind of making a U shape out of it. While it's still in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and take the other side and bend it around the plier head or against the plier head in the opposite direction. I'll move my plier. I'm squeezing, and did you notice that the prong kind of opened up a little bit? And that's okay. You just want to make sure you stay consistent, making sure that the edge of your plier head up here is against the top of this wire and not way down here. Okay, so just right there. And I'll go ahead and repeat, keeping myself close to the plier. I could have left the plier in place, but it's just my habit to move. And I'll repeat with this side. I like to leave a little bit of gap for the valley of the prong, but you could get it a little bit closer. I don't necessarily like them super tight against each other because you want to be able to spread those prongs and have a nice valley in between them. So that's 2 prongs, and I'm just repeating for 3 prongs, or the third one here. And I'm working with this half of the wire. I'm going to make 6 prongs on this one. So there goes 1, 2, and 3 prongs. And I'm just going to end this wire by going flat. To stay consistent, I'm just going to flip this over, so I'm still working with the same hand, making the same moves. And I'll make 3 more prongs with the opposite half of the wire. There's 1, here goes 2, and my last one. And there is 3. And for my last bend, I'll just make it slant. So here I'm set up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prongs. This is the bottom side of the wire. These are the prongs. Once I get that, I'll flatten everything. I like to go through and just make them consistent, and that looks pretty good. So now I'll go through and flatten them into prongs. I usually start with the end one. I brace on the pad of my finger, and you just squeeze. I usually go through this twice because the first squeeze you'll have a little gap there, and if you like that look for a prong, you can leave the gap. Normally we close those, but nothing says that you can't leave a little bubble if your gemstone's very big. So I go through these twice. I'll squeeze down the first time. And because this is round wire, sometimes the prongs want to flip and flip over on you, and that's okay. You just get control of it and keep the wires side by side. Squeezing them in as you notice, is starting an arc on this, and that's fine because eventually it turns into a circle anyway. So there goes the first time. Then I'll squeeze them flat, making sure that all the wires are side by side. And then I'll go through them again, but I'll focus here at the head of the prong. And I'll try to close that little bubble down. These are gentle squeezes, so you're not killing it. You're just working it. And then tap them flat. Come to the next one, squeeze it down, tap it flat, squeeze it down, tap it flat, and so on. And now we have 6 lovely prongs. To spread them open, I start with the very center. So 3 on this side, 3 on that side, and I split this valley first. I make a nice V shape, then go to the next one. Try to keep the V shape consistent. And the next one. We'll refine these, of course, but this is basically how we start them. We start prongs this way for many projects. And you'll see other teachers doing this too. It's kind of a standard issue. Once I get them spread out, I kind of just continue to use my fingers and work them into more of a round shape, bringing these 2 wires closer together. So basically that's the start of the prong cup. And now we'll go and make an 8 prong cup, and I'll use the 8 prong cup to capture the bigger gemstone. But this is just a demonstration of how you get the prongs started initially. Once I get the prongs made that I want, and in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, you want to end your accordion prongs with the wires pointing in the same direction. So after you've made the accordion, I usually go through, you hold it with the meaty part of your fingers, because when we squish these prong heads together, they're going to want to snap up on you because of the round wire. And that's okay. Don't freak out. It happens. So I hold steady with the meaty part of my fingers here. I drop my plier on it and I just squeeze gently. You see what I mean by it pops over? The 2 together. And then you just straighten it back out. I usually go through this twice. So the first time is just to get them close together. The second time I pass through this, I'll squeeze them even closer together. If they flip up on you, you just tap them flat. The wire is going to start to arc, and that's normal. You want that because eventually we're going to take it into a circle anyway. Okay, so I've given a little squeeze, and then I'm just going to go back through them again. I'm still holding pretty firmly with the meaty part of my fingers, and now I'm going to squeeze more on the head of the prong to bring them closer together. And you'll just carefully do each one until you get 6 or 8 nice prongs. And each time, I kind of go back through and just tap them to make sure that they lay nice next to each other. And you want to get the heads of these prongs. You don't have to. It's a different look if you leave them a little bit open. But if you're doing traditional style prongs, you want to get the head of this wire, these curves, side by side. if you can. It's okay if there's just a slight breath of space, but I try to work them so that I can get them as close as I can. And that's pretty good. After this, I find the center. So 4 prongs on one side, 4 prongs on the other. This will be my first split. So right here, I'll make a V shape in the valley of the prongs. I'll go to the next one and continue the spread them apart. Just try to keep these V shapes as consistent as you can, and we'll refine them when we bring the wire all the way around. So there's 4 of them. And now I'll just flip so that I can stay consistent. And I'll spread these apart as well. It's a challenging ring, so before, don't let yourself get frustrated before you start. Just know that it's a challenging ring. And it will take some practice. Maybe some of you will get it right away, but don't knock yourself apart if you don't. So once we get to here, the other thing I like to do now is just slightly raise that wire, the ends of the wire, so that they're not in my way when I start to make the circle. And it's easiest to take the 2 open ended prongs here and just kind of, round them out. We'll make consistency in these prongs some more after we actually get this all the way around. So the first goal is really to get your prongs made and then to create this circle as consistently as you can. Once I create the circle, I'm going to go back through and just nudge my prongs until I see nice lines between them. So, they're not slanted off. And we'll refine it even more so than this. I have one side of the wire is on top and one on the bottom. I'm going to address the one on top first. What is tricky about this setting is where these 2 end prongs come together. You have to keep that space as consistent as the other valleys between them. So you want to make sure that you don't short, what tends to happen is that these 2 will go a little shorter unless you make sure that you don't pull them in, because they're attached to the wire. So when we bend them, they either lose their position because we bring them too close together, or we pull too hard and one ends up short. So you're focused on this particular valley right here as you curve this wire around this circle. We're going to make a little loop right here. And if I weren't paying attention, I might end up with my prongs like this, in which case they're not going to lay right when they go around the gemstone. So your focus now is the valley right here. I'm going to make sure that I don't short this prong by giving a little space, making sure that my valley is consistent with the others. And I've put my thumb in there to help me curve the wire. You're just going to basically make a circle all the way around this cup, the bottom of this cup. And you want to be just to the inside of the circle or right at the valleys, because we have a second wire that's going to go around the outside of this one. So it'll be a little bigger. Okay, kind of like this. Make a complete circle. So we've hit the 360 mark right there where we come back to the prong, and now I'm just going to go slightly past that 1 and 2 prongs because that's where it'll come out. Okay, so that's my prongs now are still looking very consistent. The V shape and the 2 open-ended prongs look consistent. So let me see. I'm going to take the one from the back now. I'm going to jump over to the same side. And this is also, we have to pay attention to the open-ended prong and make sure that it sits consistently in there, that it isn't offset like that. Once I believe I've got it the best that I can get it, I'm going to hold that prong to make sure it doesn't move as I curve my wire around the cup. I'm going to pass underneath the first wire, and I'm going to stay to this side of my prongs. This is the bottom of the cup. I'm going to pass the 360 mark, and I'm going to come past it a couple of prongs. So you're looking kind of like this. We want 4 prongs on one side and 4 prongs on the other because this is an 8-prong setting. If I had 6, then I would make sure there was 3 and 3 on each side of these wires. So that's kind of the goal, is to get the wires in position so that they can come, back out and become the shank. So about like here. And then right here, I'm going to take my plier. I'll hold that wire steady. I'll try to be as even as I can to straighten the wire in between these 2 prongs. Just give it a little outward turn like this. And I'll do the same for the opposite side. I'll make sure I'm seeing 4 prongs, so my wire needs to come out in between these 2. So I'll hold it steady right there, and I'll take a slight bend out, just like that. We're going to refine the prongs a little bit more, but get yourself, after we tie it up, but get yourself to about here. If the 2 coils start to separate a little bit or they're uneven, you can just very gently give little love taps to make those bottom 2 circles a little more consistent. And then if you need to, you can refine where the bend comes out. To tie these into place, I'll use 1 foot of 28 gauge weaving wire, and I'll just insert, I'm looking at the top of the cup, the coils are the bottom of the cup. You can do this from either side, and I'm just going to insert a leading 1 inch so that I can hold on to it right here at where the wire protrudes. I'll use the other half of it, and I will just make coils all the way around this prong setting. I like to stay consistent with 3 coils within each valley. So there's 1. I usually start where the wires come out because that's, the loose end. So that's why I start over here. There goes 2. Keep these side by side. Keep them neat and nice. You won't see them, but it'll help your gemstone sit a little bit easier if you keep your coils nice. So I've made 3, and now from the bottom I'll just jump over to the second valley and I will make 3 more, and I'll do this all the way around the cup until all valleys are tied down. The original design did not use this tie wire, but I feel like it will help you a lot. There's 3, and I'll go one more. I've made this ring probably 8 times now. Yes, my tennis elbow's a little sore. And I just keep feeling like, for some of you new wire wrapping artists here in my membership, using this tie wire will just make the whole experience much easier and much more pleasant. Plus, overall, it really does help the prongs stay in place. So I feel like it's worth doing. There's 3. Now, where the wire comes out, you want to make sure you catch the wire. So when you jump into this space, I'll turn this over so you can see it. This is the elbow I'm talking about. You want to make sure that you have that wrapped in place so it doesn't, it stays. So I've made 1 coil, and now when I jump back through, make sure your little wire doesn't kink going through there. I'm going to make sure that I've got 2 wraps around this wire to make sure it stays very stable. If you can get all 3 wraps or an extra 4th wrap or something, that's fine, but I feel like 1 and then 2 with, on the elbow works quite well. So there's 2. That's 3 in that valley altogether. And now I will jump over here to the next valley, which is right here. There's 2. And if you don't have room for a 3rd one because it's an odd place where the extended wire comes out, that's fine. There goes 3, and I'll jump over. And I'll keep doing this until I get to here and make sure to wrap this elbow as well. I've got this little tail that I started out with, so I'll get it out of my way. And I'll make sure that I'm wrapping this open elbow for this extended wire so that it stays in place. I'll go ahead and get the leading little wire out of my way. Just cut it right there. You won't feel this one because it'll be buried underneath the cup, but in good habit, we always tap down our cuts. And I'm going to end this by making one last wrap right here to make sure that extended wire stays in place. So those are pretty neat wraps. Nothing fancy has to be done with this wire because again we're going to be burying it underneath the ring anyway. You just want to make sure to get it kind of near this elbow. I like to cut it right there so that I can tap it down and the cut is on the lower surface rather than the upper surface of the frame wire. And I like to kind of just tuck it into that little corner right there. Okay? So that's what it looks like from underneath the setting. This is what it looks like from the inside of the prong cup. And that looks pretty good. I got one wire a little crisscrossy right there. Just tap it flat. No big deal. Now before I bend these up, I'm going to make sure that my prong, this is here where I'm going to refine the prongs. And we need to make sure that, you know, they're spaced nicely so that when they come up on your gemstone, they're spaced nicely. If they're crooked, if they're anything, it's okay right now. So I'll use my flat nose plier. I'll make sure to tap flat, tap flat. Here's where the plier work and the wire work get a little bit tight, and it will start to get a little tighter once we bring the prongs up. But what I'm focused on here is that my two extended wires are indeed split down the middle, so 4 prongs, 4 prongs, or 3 prongs and 3 prongs on either side of these wires. And then I'll just go through and make small nudging. We're trying to align each prong to its opposite side so that we have consistency. If we feel like one prong is a little bit shorter than the other, then we try to get any curves or bends out of it. And when they come up on the cup, I'll show you how to adjust because you'll have a slight room to adjust as well. But for now, we'll just go through and make sure that we're in decent alignment with the opposite prong. And we're making sure that our valleys are consistent between them. I have one prong that my eyeball thinks is very long right here, and that's fine. So don't stress out like that if you have that, because there's a lot of forgiveness when the prongs come up. So I feel like this is pretty good. I've got fairly decent lines between my prongs. My prongs look fairly even. And that looks pretty good. After you have the center prong setting completed, the next thing I like to do is actually turn the tips up. Because I have wide valleys in between here, I probably could use a plier as wide as this. But if your prongs are smaller, you're working a smaller gemstone, these might be very close together or closer together, in which case this wide plier might collide with the other one, with the other prong. So have either a smaller flat nose or you can have your pointy chain nose available to turn these up. When we turn the tips up, you want to stay as consistent as you can. I just eyeball the whole thing. If you want to go ahead and mark each place, each tip so that you know where to bend, that's up to you. Usually what I do is I give a brace of my finger here, and when you turn these up, you're pushing the nose down. So you're giving downward pressure as you bend the tip up. And we want to make a 90-degree, not quite 90 actually, I take that back. We want to make more like a 45-degree angle in the tips of these. And you want to bend them just about 1 or 2 millimeter, more like 1 millimeter in. So I'll grip. I'm barely at the tip of it, as you can see. I'm going to give the pat of my finger. I'm making sure that I'm on both wires, and I'm pushing down as I bend the tip up to about 45 degree. It's very slight. I like 45 degree because then you can refine it once your gemstone gets into the cup. So I'll go to each prong and I will repeat this process. So you can see here that we've got the beginning of our prongs and our gem cup started. Now these prongs are still laying down flat, so the next thing after we bend the tips up is to actually raise the prong. This is where your 45 degree bent nose plier is going to be most handy, because this is a very tight space in between these prongs, the valleys. So I like to use the bent nose. You want to make sure you're raising it from the base of the prong and not just bending the middle of the prong. So here I am at the base of the prong. I'm holding the cup and I'm raising the actual prong arm up. Okay? You'll start to see it here in a second. Sometimes it's easier to get the bend started and then literally just go to the outside and kind of raise it by pushing it up a little bit. It'll get tighter once we go around and start to do all of them. But I think you can see the difference a little bit. And we'll refine it even more once the gemstone drops in there. So I'll just go through and bend all of my prongs up, get them ready to capture my gemstone. And the 45 degree is nice because I can put one tooth at the base, you know, it's just real easy to get in there at the base of the prong. So you see how we start to form the cup. And then now I'll just look on top and start to refine this. Just using my fingers, I can either push or pull them inward and outward until I feel like I get a nice even circle to receive my gemstone. Sometimes they turn a little bit, in which case, you know, you're just working this cup to make it as nice and consistently round as you can. So I'll just go through here and work each prong into place and get it ready. You can also grab it from its sides and kind of nudge it, you know, even out the head of it if you need to. Use your fingers and push them forward or push them back. And you just work with real patience right here, because getting these prongs nice and even right now is the best way to receive the gemstone. To adjust these prongs after the gemstone is in here will be more difficult, plus you will run the risk of scratching the top of your gemstone. Alright, so that looks pretty good there. I'm pretty happy with that. You also want to make sure that this circle is wide enough apart that you can just literally drop your gemstone in there. You might have to finagle it a little bit, but it'll be similar to like a snap setting, if you know what one of those are. So your gemstone should, these should be wide enough that your gemstone should just be able to fall right in there. And then from here you can kind of gauge what needs to be done with the prongs. You want to make sure that the point of the gemstone comes down, center, so that it's sitting there at the base of the circle. Sometimes, the gemstone might be offset a little bit, so you just want to double check that, finagle it, and make sure that it's truly sitting flat, or as flat as can be inside this setting. You can kind of hear it snap in slightly, right? And I'm real pleased with that. And now we'll go through and tighten the gemstone. A little trick is, if you cannot seat that gemstone, you don't feel like it's all the way there, don't put your pliers on top of it, but rather the butt end of your plier can be used to help kind of push that gemstone down and center. I change the focus here and see if I can get you a little closer. Okay, there you go. You want to make sure that these bends are on top of the gemstone. So the gemstone needs to be flat, and you also need to make sure that each one, this one is a little short, you can see it. So each of these arms needs to reach up and above your gemstone. Since the ones over here look perfect, I'm going to concentrate on raising the arms over here slightly because they're a little bit low. So I'll do that just by grounding my gemstone in there and pushing these arms forward a little bit. You guys have to forgive my raspy voice, and you have to forgive my shaky hands. It's a matter of broken ribs and tennis elbow healing. So doing the best I can, but that's why I sound the way I do, and you might see me shake during some of this. So I'm making sure that my gemstone is seated, and all I'm trying to do is bring the prong forward right now. Not so much down on top of, we're not tightening it yet. We're just trying to get the arms all raised consistently. And I'm trying, I can see which ones need to raise because of the placement. These are good, but these were a little bit shy, so I just raised them a little bit forward. You see how that one went a little forward? And that's all you have to do to get that prong head above the ridge of your gemstone. Also you can take it from the side here and push forward this way to help ease that bend over the top of the gemstone. And those look pretty good to me right now. Okay, so now we'll go through each one and we'll tighten the prong down. While we do this, you just want to make sure, I'm always stroking these extended wires here, keep them nice and neat. Certainly you won't be colliding into cameras and everything else while you're working. But that's a pretty neat cup. It's very, very good setting for these types of gemstones. So to tighten the top up, I literally will go through with this 2mm flat, or you can use your chain nose. You want to make sure you're not going to scratch the top of your gemstone, and all I'm going to do is compress. I've got my plier on the bottom of the wire, the setting, as well as on top, to have the most control that I can have when I'm gently squeezing these down. So I'll do 2, and then I'll go to the opposite side of the cup, and I'll do the opposite 2. This keeps the pressure consistent. So if you just go from 1 all the way around, you start to make inconsistent pressure on the gemstone, and it can slip, right? Not slip, but like go out of alignment. So do 2 or 1 if you only have 6 prongs, and then come to its opposite and do those, and then do the opposites from those. So basically, you know, you're just working consistently around the prongs, keeping my hand up there so that I'm keeping upward pressure, and I'm not killing it, right? I'm just closing the, closing the prong down. You want to make sure that you don't slip and gouge the top of your gemstone. So this one I'll scooch forward slightly. See how it was bent back? And now I can squish the top down a little bit. And sometimes we have to iterate through them more than once. So once I do this, I take a good look at the whole thing to see if there's a prong that needs attention. And in this case, I think I did a pretty good job, actually. This one's a little high, so I'll tap that one again. Always making sure that your plier is braced on the bottom of the cup so that you have the most leverage. And I'm real pleased with that. That's pretty much it for the prong setting. So I hope that that makes sense to you, and I hope that that helps you to make a very nice, consistent prong setting around your gemstone in the middle of this wire. Obviously, we're going to make a ring, but looking at this, you can do a lot, right, with the setting this way and 2 extended wires. We could do many, many different projects. You could turn this into a pendant. You could tie this into other frames, just like this. And it just is a beautiful cup. Beautiful and consistent little cup, and there's no taking big wire around the prong, which I find difficult to do even for myself. So I feel like this is my preferred, this is how I do prongs. All right, you guys? So I know I focused quite a bit on the prong cup in this first half of the video, and I do think I'm going to split this into 2 and give you a second part tomorrow for the ring construction itself, because my lighting is, it's after dinner time here and I'm still working on this, and so my lighting is all gone and my camera's doing weird flickering on my fingernails and on the gemstone. So I'm going to call this one good and give you part 1. You guys can set your prong cups up, and then tomorrow I will give you the actual ring construction, and we'll go from here into turning it into a completed Sophia ring, and I'll show you some embellishments and some other things. This is kind of the simple form, but tomorrow we'll make the shank and we'll continue to embellish upon this ring, as well as I might surprise you and give you 1 or 2 other projects using this midway prong cup or center prong cup, because obviously we can go to earrings, we can go to pendant, we can do a lot with this. So get to here, and then tomorrow we'll do the rest of Sophia. All right, much love, you guys. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this part. And if you do, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this prong setting. And then tomorrow I will see you with part 2 and we will finish Sophia.